We're going to look at the financial system with total, absolute clarity. Let's dive in. Navigating your finances can really feel like playing a high-stakes board game where everyone else seems to know the invisible rules, right? Well, you can either be a pawn who just rolls the dice and hopes for the best, or you can master those mechanics. Today, we're flipping the board and breaking it all down. All right, first things first. Let's completely rethink what money actually is. To really grasp the system, we have to completely separate the idea of physical paper from the concept of value. Value is inherent worth. It isn't just a green piece of paper in your wallet. It's the actual goods, services, and time that people demand out there in the real world. And this comparison perfectly illustrates that crucial difference. While value is the actual worth of a good or service, currency is simply the agreed-upon medium of exchange. It's just a moving tool, a digital or physical token that allows a baker to trade bread for a haircut without, literally dragging a dozen loaves down to the barbershop.
So, with that in mind, let's look at the system itself, banks and taxes. People often think of banks as giant static vaults where money just sits there gathering dust. But actually, scratch that. They are the living, breathing engines that keep currency constantly moving through the economy. They store, they manage, and crucially, they lend, which keeps the whole system's momentum going.
And then, of course, we have taxes, the mandatory contributions we all pay. Look, to avoid getting totally bogged down in messy political debates, you can just think of taxes impartially as a mandatory subscription fee. It's the fee we all pay to live in a functioning society. It paves the roads, funds the schools, and honestly, keeps the infrastructure from completely collapsing around us. Okay, moving right along. We need to talk about the invisible forces constantly pulling at your wealth. Let's tackle the most pervasive, invisible force out there, inflation. By definition, it's just the general increase in prices, but practically, it is a quiet thief. Think about it. Just a 3% annual inflation rate will literally cut your purchasing power in half over 24 years. So the cash sitting under your mattress right now, it's slowly losing its superpower. To put it as bluntly as possible, one single dollar today will simply not buy you the same amount of groceries as $1 did 10 years ago. The currency itself hasn't physically changed, but its purchasing power has completely evaporated. And this feeds into the broader economic cycle. As you can see playing out here, economies naturally breathe in and out. They move from a booming expansion, hit a market peak, dip down into a recession, and then climb right back into recovery. Recessions can be painful, absolutely, but they are just a necessary reset mechanism. It's a feature of the system, not a bug. Let's shift gears and navigate the tricky world of credit and interest. When you strip away all that intimidating academic jargon that banks love to throw around, interest is actually a ridiculously simple concept. It is simply the cost of borrowing money. I love this analogy because it hits the nail on the head. Interest is literally just charging rent for money. That's the whole shebang. If you borrow from a bank, you are paying them rent to use their cash. On the flip side, if you put money in a savings account, the bank is paying you rent to use yours. But how does the system decide exactly how much rent to charge you? Well, that brings us to your credit score. Think of this 3-digit number as your adult GPA. It represents your creditworthiness to the entire system. Got a high score? Awesome. You get cheaper rent. Low score? You're seen as a risk, and your rent is going to shoot up. All right, this is where it gets really fun. Let's talk about growing your wealth. Investing is the act of expending money with the expectation of achieving a profit. Honestly, it's the ultimate financial cheat code. You are essentially planting your currency like little seeds so that it grows into more value. And you're doing it entirely without your own physical labor. The system does the work for you. Now look at how dynamic this growth is. Keeping your cash totally stagnant, that loses to inflation. Simple interest, that gives you a moderate, sort of linear bump. But compound investing, wow, that scales your wealth exponentially. Compounding is when your money makes money, and then that new money starts making its own money. It spreads like wildfire. And the absolute secret ingredient to that compounding effect? Time. In finance, time isn't just some ticking clock on the wall. It is the ultimate, heavy-lifting multiplier for your investments. The longer those seeds are in the ground, the more exponentially they grow. So, we've mapped out the entire system. Let's distill all of this down to your actionable financial move.
Navigating your finances successfully requires a slightly cynical awareness of things like inflation and interest rates, paired with a huge, encouraging embrace of investing. You've got to decode the jargon. You absolutely must guard your adult GPA to avoid those high rent debt traps. And above all else, you have to let time multiply your wealth. If you take away just one single actionable piece of advice from this explainer today, let it be this: start investing as early as humanly possible. Time is the one asset you can never, ever buy back. You can always earn more currency, for sure, but you cannot manufacture more time for it to compound. So, here we are. Now that you understand the invisible rules of the game, the only question left is how you're going to play it. Will you sit on the sidelines letting inflation quietly steal your purchasing power, or will you use the system's mechanics to build true wealth? The choice is entirely yours.